The 10th of April 2020, Eric Weinstein describes a meeting he had with Jeffrey Epstein at Mr. Epstein's New York residence. Mr. Weinstein attests that, "I became aware that Jeffrey wanted to see me," and further explains that, because he himself was involved in a hedge fund, that he went to meet with Mr. Epstein at his residence on a hedge fund related matter.
I believe I became aware that Jeffrey wanted to see me. And since I was at that time involved in a small hedge fund, I went to see him on 71st Street across from the Frick Museum.
The 13th of April 2020. Mr. Weinstein once again confirms that he visited Mr. Epstein to drop off materials in relation to a hedge fund matter.
The place that I myself dropped off materials for Jeffrey Epstein to review in connection to a hedge fund matter.
In November 2020, Mr. Weinstein states, "Let it be known that I don't know any more about Jeffrey Epstein than I have already said." Mr. Weinstein then continues, "Now, your friends at MIT, their problem is that Jeff Epstein showed up as the only person who could fund their scientific research."
Like, let it be known that I don't know anything more than I've already said. Now, your friends at MIT, their problem is that Jeff Epstein showed up as the only person capable of continuing U.S. scientific.
After numerous, lengthy accounts offered by Mr. Weinstein throughout 2020 as to the nature of his acquaintance with Mr. Epstein and his reasons for attending his residence in around 2003-2004, Mr. Weinstein furthermore wished to make it abundantly clear that he knew nothing else in relation to Mr. Epstein or his activities that he hadn't already publicly disclosed. Of most particular relevance here are Mr. Epstein's suspected activities of espionage and forming acquaintances in order to gain access to the proprietary research of several of the United States' leading scientists, chiefly via his membership and funding of the Edge Foundation, of which Mr. Weinstein was a member, contributor and regular attendee. Indeed, Mr. Weinstein's originally stated motivation for offering, unbidden, a long-form podcast account of the nature of his acquaintance and dealings with Mr. Epstein was to make it absolutely clear that he, himself, played no part in, nor had any awareness of, nor even any information relevant to, Mr. Epstein's access to proprietary, scientific or technological research, as would reasonably give rise to concerns of potential espionage. Subsequently, in March 2021, however, Mr. Weinstein, who, it ought be noted, has developed a reputation for being extraordinarily proprietary and secretive about his own research in mathematical physics, a theory he calls geometric unity, provided a fuller account as to what he in fact discovered about Mr. Epstein's apparent covert access to proprietary scientific research. In this case, Mr. Weinstein's own extremely closely held, proprietary physics research. Such apparently covert access as Mr. Weinstein, according to his own account, became aware of during his meeting with Mr. Epstein in around 2003-2004.
You know that the first person outside of me to get a look at geometric unity was Jeffrey Epstein. How did he know I was working on this? I don't know.
So your ideas that formed geometric unity was something that his eyes have seen?
I was pushed to talk to Jeffrey Epstein as one of the only people who could help me. That aside.
Yes.
What was Jeffrey Epstein doing hanging around all of these scientists? I don't think that was the same program that was about compromising political leaders and business people.
At this point, it is pertinent to refer back to Mr. Weinstein's original, March 2020, long-form account, as to the nature of his acquaintance with Jeffrey Epstein and his motivation in offering an account of it.
Recently, when the news turned to Jeffrey Epstein, my wife said to me, "You know, Eric, you called this when you met him early on." And I said, "What do you remember?" And she said that you called me immediately afterwards and you said, "I've just met a construct." And she asked what it was a construct. And I said, "I met somebody who appears to be a hedge fund billionaire, who I don't think is actually, in fact, involved particularly in hedge fund trading. I felt like what I was meeting was an actor who had been hired or constructed to play a part." Ever since that meeting, I've used one word and one word alone when talking about Jeffrey Epstein, and particularly with people who knew him, who were friends or acquaintances or colleagues of mine. And by using the word construct repeatedly, I attempted to make an indelible image that I was very bothered and was in fact making a prediction that one day it was quite probable, although not definite, and certainly not certain, that Jeffrey Epstein would be revealed to be something other than what he had apparently been chronicled as being and what he had portrayed himself as being.
And, hence it is from Mr. Weinstein's own accounts of his dealings with, and knowledge of Mr. Epstein, that two inescapable questions arise. If Mr. Weinstein was aware in 2003-2004 that Jeffrey Epstein had somehow apparently obtained covert access to proprietary and confidential research such as his own, for what reason did he fail to alert any of the Edge Foundation's membership body of renowned scientific researchers and technologists of the extraordinary risk Mr. Epstein presented to the confidentiality of their proprietary research? And, why by the same token, knowing what he inescapably did know about Mr. Epstein, did Mr. Weinstein continue, for more than a decade thereafter, to regularly attend Edge Foundation events funded by Mr. Epstein, and look on silently as Mr. Epstein, the man who had somehow gained unauthorized access to his own confidential research, systematically ingratiated himself with leading scientific and technological luminaries, eventually gaining privileged access to some of the most prestigious researchers and research institutions in the United States?
Now, your friends at MIT, their problem is that Jeff Epstein showed up as the only person capable of continuing U.S. scientific tradition. You see, the U.S. scientific tradition is a little bit like the Russian. It's combative. Okay?